The roles African Americans portray in media are not satisfactory. Although the roles have changed during the development of media, the current relationship is not representative of true African American people or their lifestyles. The question is, how do roles African Americans play in television, advertising, and music affect society's perception of African Americans in our culture? Throughout the history of television, the roles and the representation of African Americans has developed with the changing cultural conditions. However, the representation of African Americans has not fully simulated into today's society. What the average citizen views on their television does not accurately portray the African Americans' influence on America. The early days of television held great optimism and hope for this new form of media as an avenue for African Americans to assimilate into white culture. However, a pattern became evident, a pattern of typecasting African Americans into roles which did not accurately or wholly portray the individual. A misrepresentation of African Americans became the common image on television. In the 1980s, The Cosby Show depicted a new portrayal of African Americans as having middle-class lifestyles where characters were seen as successful doctors, nurses, and lawyers. The Cosby Show was completely different from any previous African American show. Before The Cosby Show, African Americans on television were most commonly characterized as singers, dancers, maids, servants, and buffoons. The African Americans on this show talked intelligently about important issues. The show continued to allude to famous African American art, authors, and universities. The intelligent African American was constantly depicted on the show through things such as the anti-apartheid poster on Theo's door and the naming of Sandra's children after Winnie and Nelson Mandela. The show's producers tried very hard to eliminate all stereotypes of African Americans in this show. They wanted to show African Americans in a positive light in order to change America's concept of them. For some reason, these types of shows did not last very long. During the 90s, African Americans were once again portrayed in a buffoonish and unintelligent light, with shows like The Wayans Brothers and Martin. In one Wayans Brothers episode, Sean, an amateur actor, gets high before an audition for a job. In predominantly Caucasian sitcoms, like Frasier or Murphy Brown, viewers will never see this type of portrayal. In our current decade, an examination of the network's primetime lineups produced similar results concerning the quality and quantity of African American-oriented programs. None of the three major networks, ABC, CBS, or NBC, have a show involving predominantly African American characters. In fact, none of these networks have a primetime show with a black main character. The only bright spot for the major networks is that there are blacks being shown in more dramas. ABC's hit show Grey's Anatomy features several black doctors who are portrayed as strong and intelligent characters. False stereotypes are perpetuated in the advertising industry as well. Faces like Rastus, the Cream of Wheat Chief, Aunt Jemima, and Uncle Ben all show African Americans in a subservient, passive role that maintains the idea of the submissive and happy black slave. By looking specifically at Aunt Jemima, we see an image that has changed over time, however negative connotations still remain. The original image of Aunt Jemima was criticized for its outdated depiction of a mammy, and in 1989 the image evolved into the woman wearing a lace collar and pearl earrings. Although the change was perceived as an improvement, the picture only alluded to maid service rather than slavery. Another common theme in advertising is portraying black women in animalistic, sexualized ways. Black women are more likely than any other racial group to be shown in ads wearing animal prints. Showing black women highly sexualized by their dress only reinforces negative stereotypes. In the article Color Them Beautiful and Visible, an African American model, Asia Kane, says her father warned her when she was little that models don't look like us. The author goes on to explain how the media is beginning to realize that beauty isn't always the Caucasian, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl next door. As a result, companies are increasingly turning to African American models to use in ads. CoverGirl candies, Evian, Avon, Pepsi, and Clairol are just a few. According to Ross A. Kendricks, an African American public relations executive, the struggle can be clearly seen in the representation of African Americans in advertising. The practice of advertising is to quickly link image and product in such a way that a lasting impression is created in the public's mind. Both in America and abroad, advertisers distorted the role and the image of African Americans until everyone became confused by the picture represented. The impression created by the U.S. media is that African American culture is a montage of hip hop music, athletic prowess, kente cloth wearing African families, sarcastic, jaded children, and singing and dancing youth. As a powerful instrument in the African American community, the music industry is yet another influential media tool. The majority of the rap and hip hop music buyers are white teens from middle class suburbia, but African Americans are the ones who feel the effects. Music lyrics and videos have increasingly become oversexed and violent. Rap artists, who are most commonly black men, like 50 Cent and Snoop Dogg, continue to use lyrics that degrade black women, promote violence, and represent the African American community as aggressive and violent. The females of the hip-hop community are also subject to exploitation. More and more, young women and girls are subjecting themselves to over-sexualization as becoming video girls and vixens. Derek Clark, an independent producer for Hitland Entertainment, commented on this phenomenon in the music industry.
Half of those girls out there that are trying, well, 90% of those girls have ideas that this is going to lead to success for them. Like, I'm going to be an actor or something. No, you're not going to be no actor if you in there stripping down to nothing in the videos. They're going to look at you as low pro.
Rap and hip-hop lyrics used to be the stories that artists would tell about their lives and their surroundings. Artists like Tupac Shakur, Eazy-E, and Queen Latifah used music to expose the world to the issues that most black women and men faced on a daily basis. Now, the music is about glitz and glamour and the ego. The money, the violence, the cars, the women, and the drugs are taking center stage and shaping a new idea of what black culture is about. The music industry has let hip-hop culture turn into something new. Change should be positive, right? But when it comes to the hip-hop culture and young kids in the black community, who can really say where this change is going? I guess the saying, "what you see is what you get," really means more than we thought. In conclusion, the television is presently in over 99% of American homes. The advertising, musical, and television media presented on those televisions has a power to change mass habits and attitudes. Reverend Jesse Jackson once said, "Media depicts African Americans in 5 deadly ways: less intelligent, less hardworking, less universal, less patriotic, and more violent than they really are." African Americans, when portrayed, are done so negatively. Perhaps, if blacks were seen more frequently on television, in roles, in advertisements, and in music, as comparable to whites, the black real-life employment might be favorably affected. One way to change the trend is to have more African Americans behind the scenes and in production, in order to have realistic portrayals of African Americans. Current roles may encompass African American life, but they are far from reality. Media has the ability to shape people's opinions, views, and stereotypes of other cultures. If what one views is false, then he or she absorbs and projects those false images. However, if views of other cultures are portrayed more accurately, then one will enrich viewers' lives and relate to one another more openly. America can then come to a better understanding of the many cultures it contains and the beauty each has to offer.